Hey guys, welcome to Rhino demo. I'm sure you've seen the primary stool demo. This demo will cover the three other projects that I'd like you guys to model. We will start with the brio table. I have here all the kind of the image assets that I've already imported onto Rhino so that I can kind of look at them as a reference. In order to do that, you just simply type in picture on your command line, and you go to your file and you click on any image. So I'm going to bring the primary stool again, for instance, open, and you just click and drag, or you click, drag and click, and you'll get a photo of that. I'm going to delete that. So let's kind of do this brio table. I'm just going to scale that up for a little bit so I can kind of see better. And another thing I want you to do is make sure that you guys are working in the proper units. So type in units. Oops, units. I'm typing too fast. Units. And make sure that your model units is set to inches. This is important because when you type in, let's say 36, it'll automatically be 36 inches. If this is set to be millimeters, you type in 36, it'll be 36 millimeter. If you have it set to feet, if you type in 36, it'll be 36 feet, right? So in this case, we want our units to be in inches so that we can kind of type in our values in inches. So make sure you double check your units on your model. And I will be giving you an example of the way how I like you to model early on as you're learning Rhino. But eventually you guys are going to model a lot more effectively. So I just want to tell you that this demo kind of taking you in a longer journey, but there's literally dozen different ways of modeling this kind of model depending on what you want to do. If it's production, you're going to model it differently, meaning it's going to actually be physically produced. If it's going to be for rendering, you're going to model it differently. You know, if you're going to have it on a web image and you want the files to be smaller, you'll model it differently. So there's many different ways of doing this thing, and you guys will make that decision as you become more of a power user, if you will. But right now, we're going to take baby steps and just kind of use primary shape stacking method, okay? It's the most basic way of modeling in Rhino. So we're going to make some assumptions here and kind of give it some dimension to these things. So let's kind of make some series of discs or this cylinder. And I'll just click, and it's going to ask me for a radius, which you can see here up on the screen here. So I assume that this guy here is maybe about, I don't know, 16 inches. So I'm going to type 8 as a radius, enter. Now it's asking me to give it a height. I'm going to say 0.75. So it's a thin disc, right? And then you can continue on. So let's do another one. That tube is probably, I don't know, about a 1 inch or 2 inch diameter, and it's quite long. So we've made two primitive shapes, right? Cylinders. So let's if I want to make this guy here, I could also do it again, or I can copy this. So I'm going to select it, hold down Alt, and then click one of these arrows, and then that makes a copy. All right. So do not click the arrow and then hold down Alt, because it won't do anything. You want to hold down Alt first, click the arrow, and then drag it, and it'll make a copy. All right. So with this one, I will make this tube here, which is a little bit skinnier. So I'm going to use this gumball. These little square pegs are the scaling tools. So I'm going to click that, and then you see how it scales in one direction, but if you hold down Shift, it'll scale in both directions. So I'm just going to make a skinnier tube, kind of eyeball it here. And then that's probably too skinny, but it's okay. And I'm sure I'll use that later. I'm going to make a copy of this. I'm going to hold down Alt first, take this blue arrow and drag it up because it's a tabletop. And then I am going to take my scale gizmo and just kind of scale it up. Maybe the tabletop's about this big. Now we just need to arrange these shapes so that it's all centered. So the command is align. And then I need to select my objects that I want to align. So I click on all the objects. I'm going to hit enter. And it gives me a lot of kind of options. I can do concentric, and then it just brings everything like to the center because these are all circular objects, which is great. So I'm just going to click that and I'll just kind of replace it here. It doesn't matter. And then now just remember I have this little thing stuck in here, so I'm going to just window select it and then drag it up so I can see it. So I have the basis of my model done. So now I can just kind of bring this down lower, kind of scale it the way I want it. And I'm kind of almost done. Right? That was really quick, but let's take it up a notch and give it some details. Like there's a part line here, and there's some knobs to move this piston up and down. There's a little base right here, and another kind of a lever. So let's just kind of detail it out a little bit more. You know, in model making, the more subtle details you add, the better your model will look. But of course, that'll also increase your model size. This is where I'm going to get into more kind of slightly more advanced editing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this thing, and I'll just move it vertical so that I can just keep it all straight up and down. In case you don't know how I'm rotating, it's the right click button is a rotate. Shift and right click allows you to pan. I'm pretty sure I talked about it maybe, but just in case I haven't and you'd see me doing stuff. Oops. So now what I want to do here is I want to reduce the length of this pipe, right? So I am going to do slightly more advanced modeling technique is kind of individual surface or face selection. So if you hold down Shift and Control at the same time, you get to click, let me zoom in here, Shift and Control and click that. You'll only select that face, which allows you to move and shrink that tube, which is actually quite powerful. So then if I just click without holding down Control Shift, you select the whole item. So let me just kind of move it up here so we can kind of see what we're doing. And let's make a smaller disk. So I'm going to hold down Shift Control and make like a little disk like that. I'm going to make a copy of this, Alt and drag. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to make that a little thinner. So I have the pieces for my little part line here. Now I just got to arrange them in the proper location. So this is my little spacer. And since I've moved it straight up, I can just move it straight down. So that gives me a little shadow line when I render. And I guess that'll be my little. And you know, again, if I'm going to make it for production, I'm going to make sure that these are all lined up or trimmed up. But if this is just for rendering, I'm going to just combine it or collide it into one another. And I'm not going to really, it's not going to kill me, basically. And maybe this one should go a little taller. I'm going to bring it here. So let's make that little truncated part. I'm going to just take one of these guys, make a copy of it. And this is where that face editing capability is very powerful. So Control Shift, click that face, and then Shift, drag. So now I have a truncated part. So now I can bring that down here. So now you can see my model's looking a little bit more like what a table should look like. And let's add those little thumb screws and thumbtacks. Again, rather than making it from scratch, I'm just going to take my shapes that I already have. Oops. Alt and then drag, and then hit this blue, click once, then I can key in a value. So here, instead of going to 3D view and trying to pick that face, I'm holding down Control Shift and I'm just windowing, which selects that face. So I'm kind of now rushing in, kind of going into my advanced editing mode here. I'm going to make a copy of, oh, I did it again, Alt and drag. Hold down Control and Shift and drag over that face so I can kind of stretch it out. Do I have, oh yeah, I do have scaling capability here, which is great. So I'm going to just make it a little skinnier for that little handle. Control Shift again, just to make that handle a little longer. Now I'm going to rotate it, and I kind of need to be in this view here. So here, I'm going to rotate along the blue axis. So I'm just going to click on the blue once, type, and then drag it back towards the front. Jam it into this thing. So there you go. So you see how it's rotating kind of off-centered and it's hard for me to see my object? What you can do is go zoom, Z, enter, S for selected, enter, and it'll zoom right into that object you selected. And next time you rotate around that object so you can kind of get a better perspective of, you know, what you're doing. Okay, there we go. Now I'm in there quite nicely. And there's my little handle. All right, so I think I am going to leave this demo at this. Well, actually, this one, it'll be cooler if it was slightly rotated. And then bring it back down like that. Okay, so don't worry too much about scale at the moment, but I'd like you guys to kind of learn how to model and stack and do the boolean or cutting and trimming. We'll get into more advanced stuff in another week or so. You know what, before I leave though, let me kind of show you how powerful that Control Shift tool is. So let's say I want to detail out this edge of this table. Control Shift this top. That allows me to make that chunkier or skinnier. But there's this little blue sphere here. If you grab that and you pull it up, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be making a completely different face. So if you see how that is separated from that? That's really powerful because now if I select this, I could scale this. And you can see how it didn't affect this bottom part. It started to taper from here and up. So that's a really powerful tool that you guys can use to make like compound shapes pretty easily. And then I'm going to bring this down. So let's bring it down so that it's a little bit thinner. And then I'm going to take this blue dot again to drag in a new face to give it a thicker tabletop. So that's a pretty simple and a really powerful way to do like multiple edits. All right. So there you go, guys. We'll see you guys on the next demo.